It was the summer of 2018, and my brother Jake and I needed an escape. Life had been grinding us down, me with a dead-end job in the city, him dealing with the fallout from a messy divorce. We grew up in a small town on the edge of the Appalachians, where the mountains loomed like silent guardians, and we'd spent our childhoods exploring the fringes of those woods. But we'd never gone deep, not like this. Jake suggested it one night over the phone, a real backcountry campout, off the maps, just us in the wild. "Remember how Dad used to talk about the old trails?" he said. "The ones the loggers abandoned back in the 30s? Let's find one." I laughed, but the idea stuck. We were both in our 30s now, too old for kid stuff, but maybe that's why we needed it, to feel alive again, away from the noise of the world. We packed light, tents, sleeping bags, a cooler of food and beer, flashlights, and a couple of knives just in case. No guns. We weren't hunters, and besides, the locals always said the real dangers in those hills weren't the kind you could shoot. We drove out from Charleston early one Friday, the highway giving way to winding roads that snaked up into the ridges. The air changed as we climbed. Cooler, sharper, laced with pine. We parked at a pull-off near an old fire road, slung our packs, and hiked in. It was about 5 miles to the spot Jake had scouted on an outdated topo map, through thick underbrush and over fallen logs slick with moss. The trail wasn't marked anymore. It was more of a suggestion, a faint depression in the earth where feet had once worn it down. Birds called overhead, and squirrels chattered. But as we pushed deeper, those sounds thinned out, replaced by the rustle of leaves and our own breathing. By late afternoon, we reached the creek. It was a narrow ribbon of water tumbling over smooth stones, bordered by ancient oaks whose branches intertwined like gnarled fingers. The ground was soft, carpeted in fallen leaves and ferns, and the air hung heavy with the scent of earth. Rich, almost alive. "This is it," Jake said, dropping his pack with a grin. We set up camp quickly, pitched the tent on a flat spot near the bank, gathered dry wood for a fire ring, and strung up our food bags high in a tree to keep bears away. The sun filtered through the canopy in golden shafts, warming our faces as we cracked open a couple of beers and sat on a log, toes dipping into the cool stream. We talked about everything and nothing, old high school stories, Mom's famous apple pie recipe, how the world had changed since we were kids. It felt good, restorative, like the woods were washing away the grime of daily life. As dusk crept in, the forest transformed. The light dimmed to a soft blue-gray, and shadows lengthened, pooling in the hollows between trees. We built the fire, flames crackling to life as we skewered hot dogs on sticks and watched the embers glow. The creek's murmur grew louder in the quiet, a constant whisper that blended with the occasional hoot of an owl. Jake pulled out his guitar. Yeah, he insisted on bringing it, and strummed a few old folk tunes, the kind Dad used to play. "You hear those stories from the bar back home?" he asked between songs. "About the echoes in these hills?" I nodded, half listening. Locals spun yarns about the mountains holding on to sounds, replaying them like old records. Lost hikers calling for help, whispers from miners long dead in cave-ins. Folklore, I figured, born from isolation and moonshine. We laughed it off, clinking bottles, the fire's warmth pushing back the chill that settled with the night. Around 10, we doused the flames to coals and crawled into the tent, zipping up against the bugs. The ground was uneven, but exhaustion hit quick after the hike. I lay there, staring at the nylon ceiling, listening to Jake's breathing even out into snores. The woods were alive outside, wind sighing through branches, the creek babbling on. It was peaceful at first, lulling, but sometime after midnight, I jolted awake. At first, I couldn't place what had pulled me from sleep. Then I heard it, a faint call, distant, like an echo bouncing off the ridges. It sounded like a name. My name? Mark? It came again, thin and wavering, carried on the breeze. I sat up, heart thumping a little harder. Jake stirred beside me. "You hear that?" I whispered. He mumbled something, half asleep, then listened. There was again, "Jake, Mark," fainter this time, but clearer, like someone lost in the fog. We unzipped the tent flap and peered out. The night was pitch black now, stars hidden behind a canopy so thick it felt oppressive. A mist had rolled in from the creek, swirling low to the ground, turning the air clammy. I grabbed my flashlight, its beams slicing through the haze, illuminating trunks and underbrush, but revealing nothing else. "Probably just the wind," Jake said, though his voice lacked conviction. We'd heard about how sounds could travel weird in these valleys. Echoes distorting, amplifying. Maybe an animal, a fox, or a coyote making odd cries. We shouted back, "Hello? Anyone out there?" Our voices rang out, swallowed by the dark. Silence followed, thick and unbroken. We waited, ears straining, but nothing. Shrugging it off as nerves, we zipped back up and tried to settle. But sleep was elusive now. Every rustle outside set my mind racing. An hour passed, maybe more. I was dozing fitfully when it started again, this time closer. "Mark, come on, man." It was Jake's voice or something like it, but muffled, as if spoken through water. I nudged him awake. "What the hell?" he muttered, sitting up. We listened together. "Jake, let's go." My skin prickled. It wasn't just names now. It was phrases echoing back snippets we'd said earlier. "Remember Dad's stories?" It whispered, faint but unmistakable. We froze, exchanging wide-eyed glances in the dark. "That's us," I hissed. "That's our conversation from tonight." Jake shook his head, denial etched on his face. We called out again, louder this time, demanding who was there. The response came immediate, mimicking our shouts perfectly. "Who's there? Who's there?" But closer, maybe 50 yards out, hidden in the mist. Panic edged in, slow but insistent. We fumbled for our knives, gripping them like talismans. The flashlight beams danced wildly as we scanned outside again, but the fog had thickened, reducing visibility to a few feet. Trees loomed like sentinels, their bark slick and shadowed. The creek's murmur seemed mocking now, underscoring the unnatural quiet between calls. "It's got to be pranksters," Jake whispered, though we both knew that was impossible. No roads nearby, no trails. Who would hike this far just to mess with us? And how could they know our words, our voices? The echoes continued, growing bolder. Fragments of our afternoon talk, our laughs distorted into eerie wails. "Apple pie, high school," whispered from the left, then the right, encircling us. My chest tightened, breath shallow. It felt like the forest was listening, recording, playing back our lives in a twisted loop. We didn't sleep after that. Huddled in the tent, we whispered plans. Wait for dawn, pack fast, hike out. But the voices pressed on, now right outside, brushing against the fabric. "Mark, Jake, stay." It wasn't aggressive, not screaming, just persistent, insistent, like a plea from something forgotten. I thought of the legends then, the ones we dismissed, spirits of the lost, echoes of souls trapped in the hills, repeating until they drew others in. Grounded as I tried to stay, doubt crept in. What if the woods held memories, not just sounds? What if we'd stumbled into a place where the past lingered, hungry for company? Jake's face was pale in the flashlight glow, his usual bravado cracked. "This ain't right," he muttered. "Feels like we're not alone." Dawn came gray and slow, the mist lifting reluctantly as light filtered through. The voices had faded with the dark, leaving only the creek's innocent babble. We emerged cautiously, scanning the woods. No footprints, no signs of intrusion, just our camp, untouched. We packed in silence, rolling the tent with shaking hands, the air still heavy with that damp, earthy scent. As we shouldered our packs and started back along the faint trail, I couldn't shake the feeling of eyes on us. Trees whispered in the breeze, branches creaking like old bones. Halfway out, I glanced back, one last look at the creek bend where we'd camped. And there, in the lingering fog, I saw it, a figure tall and still, standing exactly where our tent had been. It wasn't clear, more silhouette than substance, blurred by distance and haze, but watched us, motionless, as if rooted to the spot. I blinked, and it was gone, dissolved into the trees. Jake didn't see it. He was ahead, pushing hard for the car. We didn't speak of it on the drive home, the radio filling the void with static-laced country tunes. Back in the city, life resumed, work, routines, but but the echoes followed me. In quiet moments, alone in my apartment, I'd hear them. Faint calls, my name whispered in the hum of the fridge or the wind outside. Jake and I drifted after that. Calls grew sparse, excuses piled up. I wonder if he hears them too, pulling at him like they do me. Those woods changed something, left a mark deeper than any trail. Sometimes I dream of returning, of answering the calls, stepping into that fog. But I know better. Some places in Appalachia aren't for the living. They're for the lost, and once they call your name, they never truly let go. The dread sits quiet now, a shadow in my mind, waiting for the night to stir it awake again. Story 2. I'd always been the type to handle things on my own. After the year I'd had, losing my job and the factory shut down, then the breakup that followed like a bad aftertaste, I figured solitude was what I needed. Not the kind you get in a city apartment, staring at walls, but real isolation, out where the world couldn't touch you. That's how I ended up planning my first solo camping trip deep in Appalachia. I grew up on the fringes of these mountains in a holler near Boone, North Carolina, where the trees crowd in like old friends with secrets. Folks around there talk about the woods like they're alive, full of forgotten things, but I never paid it much mind. I just wanted quiet. I packed my old backpack with essentials, a one-man tent, sleeping bag, MREs, a hatchet, and a dog-eared paperback for company. No phone signal where I was headed, and that was the point. The drive took me off the interstate and onto narrow, twisting roads that climbed into the ridges. Pavement gave way to gravel, then dirt, until I parked at the end of a logging trail that hadn't seen use in years. Slinging my pack, I hiked in about 3 miles, following a faint path overgrown with rhododendrons and laurel. The air was crisp for late spring, carrying that earthy chill that seeps from the soil after rain. Towering hemlocks and oaks blocked most of the sky, their branches forming a green ceiling that filtered sunlight into speckled patterns on the forest floor. The ground was soft, blanketed in pine needles and fallen leaves, muffling my steps. I found my spot in a small clearing, maybe 20 feet across, ringed by those massive trees. It felt secluded, almost intimate, like the woods had carved out this pocket just for me. I pitched the tent facing east, hoping for morning light, and gathered firewood from the underbrush. Dry branches snapped clean, no rot. As the sun dipped lower, painting the canopy in shades of amber, I built a small fire in a ring of stones. The flames crackled to life, pushing back the encroaching shadows. I sat on a log, boiling water for coffee, and cracked open my book, a worn copy of some old mystery novel. For the first time in months, tension eased from my shoulders. This was what I came for. No voices, no demands, just the soft sigh of wind through leaves. Dusk settled gradually, the way it does in these deep woods, where day doesn't end so much as fade. The temperature dropped, and I added layers, a flannel shirt over my tee, wool socks in my boots. The fire's glow illuminated the immediate area, casting flickering shadows on the tree trunks that seemed to dance just out of sync with the flames. I ate a simple meal, beans from a can heated over the coals, and washed it down with black coffee. The book held my attention for a while, the plot twisting in ways that mirrored the gnarled roots around me. But as full dark arrived, around 9, I noticed a quiet. Not silence. The woods are never truly silent, but a hush, like everything was holding its breath. Crickets chirped sporadically, and far off, an owl hooted once, then fell quiet. I shrugged it off, attributing it to my city ears not being tuned to the rhythm here. I doused the fire to embers, careful not to let it spread, and crawled into the tent. Zipping up the flap, I lay back on my sleeping bag, flashlight beside me, listening to the night settle in. Sleep came in fits at first, my mind replaying the year's failures like a bad loop. But eventually, exhaustion won, and I drifted off. It was sometime after midnight. I checked my watch later, around 1:30, when the first sound pulled me awake. A subtle rustling, high up, like leaves brushing in a breeze. But there was no wind. The air inside the tent was still, heavy. I lay there, eyes open in the dark, straining to place it. It came again, softer, from the canopy above. Maybe a squirrel, I thought, or branches settling. These old trees creak and shift all the time. I rolled over, pulling the bag tighter, and tried to ignore it. But the rustling persisted, intermittent, like something moving deliberately through the foliage. Not frantic, not like an animal foraging, just purposeful. I sat up, heart beating a little faster now, and listened. It seemed to circle, starting from one side of the clearing, then the other, always overhead, never on the ground. Unease prickled at the back of my neck, that primal sense of being watched. I grabbed my flashlight, unzipped the flap quietly, and shone the beam upward. The light pierced the darkness, illuminating branches thick with needles, swaying slightly, as if disturbed. But nothing there, no eyeshine, no shapes. Just the trees, endless and indifferent. I swept the beam around the clearing, my fire pit smoldering faintly, logs undisturbed, no tracks in the soft earth. "Hello," I called out, my voice sounding small, absorbed by the vastness. No answer, of course. The rustling stopped abruptly, as if whatever it was had paused to listen. I waited, beam steady, but after a minute, I felt foolish. Overactive imagination. I told myself, solo camping does that to people. I zipped back up, lay down, and forced my breathing to slow. The book lay forgotten beside me. Reading was the last thing on my mind now. But the sounds returned, bolder this time. Around 2 a.m., they grew distinct. Not just rustling, but shifts like weight transferring from branch to branch. Footsteps? No, that couldn't be. Too high up, 30 feet at least. I pictured a raccoon or possum, but the movements were too measured, too heavy for small critters. They circled again, clockwise around the clearing, pausing every few seconds. My pulse quickened, a quiet pressure building in my chest, like the air itself was thickening. Then something dropped, a small twig, landing with a soft thud just outside the tent. I froze, listening. Another followed, then a third, each one closer, as if being tossed down deliberately. Not falling naturally. There was intent in the spacing. I bolted upright, knife in hand now. The hatchet was too bulky inside. "Who's there?" I shouted, voice cracking the silence. It echoed back faintly from the ridges, but no reply came. Just more rustling, nearer now, directly above me. I could almost feel it, eyes peering down through the leaves, hidden in the canopy's depths. Panic edged in, slow and insidious. I shone the flashlight through the mesh window, angling it up. Branches again, empty. But the sounds continued, footsteps on the boughs, circling tighter. Imagination ran wild. What if it was a person? Stories from home flickered in my mind. Feral folk, hermits gone wild in these hills, living off the grid, watching intruders. Or worse, something lost to the woods, forgotten by time. I shook it off. That was legend stuff, not real. But the drops kept coming, twigs, leaves, even a small pine cone that bounced off the tent roof. Each one felt like a message, a taunt. "I see you. You're not alone." I huddled in the center, knees drawn up, knife gripped, white-knuckled. The tent felt flimsy, a thin barrier against whatever lurked above. Hours stretched. I checked my watch obsessively. 2:45, 3:15, 4 o'clock. The rustling never let up, a constant companion, wearing at my nerves like dripping water. Dawn crept in gray and reluctant, light filtering through the trees in pale shafts. The sounds faded with the dark, vanishing as if they'd never been. I waited until full light before emerging, body stiff from tension. The clearing looked innocent. Dew on the grass, birds starting their chorus. I scanned the ground, twigs scattered around the tent, more than natural fall would account for. Then I saw them, footprints in the soft soil, pressed into the needle bed. Not animal, too large, bipedal, with a stride that led from the tree straight to the base of the nearest oak. They stopped there, abruptly, as if whatever made them had climbed up and vanished into the branches. I knelt, tracing one with my finger. Deep heel impressions, toes splayed wide, like bare feet accustomed to rough terrain. Human-like, but off, too elongated, arches too high. My stomach twisted. This wasn't a prank, not out here. I searched the canopy again, but sunlight revealed only leaves and bark, No hiding spots obvious from below. I broke camp fast, stuffing gear into my pack without breakfast, the chill air raising goose flesh on my arms. As I hiked out, the woods felt different, watchful, the trees closing ranks behind me. Every rustle overhead made me flinch, glancing up instinctively. I made it to the car by noon, drove straight home without stopping. That was 3 years ago now. I haven't camped since, sticking to the safety of paved paths and crowded trails. But the memory clings, a quiet dread that surfaces on still nights. I hear rustling in the wind sometimes, feel that pressure in my chest, and wonder who, or what, was up there dropping signals, waiting. These mountains hold onto their secrets, and once they've marked you, they don't let go easy. Isolation I sought, but what I found was something older, lonelier, lurking just out of sight, patient as the trees themselves. Let's move to story 3. We've been talking about it for months, my buddies and I, escaping the grind of city life for a real backwoods adventure in the Appalachians. Tom worked construction, always complaining about the noise. Sarah was a teacher, burned out from endless Zoom calls during the pandemic. And Mike, well, he was the outdoorsy one, the guy who'd drag us on these trips with promises of pristine nature and cold beers under the stars. Me? I was just along for the ride, a desk jockey from Knoxville who hadn't pitched a tent since Boy Scouts. But the idea appealed. Unplug, reconnect, leave the world behind. We chose a spot deep in the Monongahela National Forest, off an old logging road that wasn't even on most maps. Untouched, Mike said, showing us the topo lines on his phone before signal dropped. Like stepping back in time. We laughed, packed the trucks with gear, and headed out one Friday afternoon in early fall, when the leaves were just starting to turn. The drive took us hours, winding through valleys where mist clung to the hills like smoke from forgotten fires. Pavement turned to gravel, then rutted dirt that jostled our coolers and tents. We parked at the road's end, where vines and briars had reclaimed the edges, and hiked in a couple miles, packs heavy on our backs. The woods were dense here, towering hardwoods mixed with pines, their trunks moss-covered and thick as pillars. Sunlight filtered through in patches, casting long shadows even at noon, making the underbrush look like a tangled web. We joked about getting lost, but Mike had a compass and GPS, though he admitted the batteries might not last. Birds flitted overhead, and squirrels scolded from branches. But as we pushed deeper, those sounds tapered off, replaced by the crunch of our boots on fallen leaves. The air smelled clean, earthy, with a hint of decay from the forest floor, mushrooms sprouting from rotting logs, ferns unfurling in the damp. We found our site by late afternoon, a small flat area near the overgrown logging road, ringed by trees that formed a natural bowl. An old stump served as a table, and a trickle of a stream nearby provided water we'd filter. We set up camp efficiently, tents in a loose circle, a fire pit dug out with shovels. Sarah strung up a tarp for rain, Tom gathered wood, and I helped Mike with the bear bag, hoisting food high on a branch. It felt good, purposeful, like we were carving out our own little world. As the sun dipped, we cracked open beers and grilled burgers over the flames, the sizzle mixing with our laughter. Stories flowed. Tom's latest job site mishap, Sarah's nightmare students, Mike's tales of past hikes where he'd seen deer or eagles. I shared about my divorce, how the empty apartment back home echoed too much. The fire crackled, sending sparks skyward, and for a while, the woods felt welcoming, a blanket of quiet wrapping around us. But as evening deepened, a fog rolled in from the valleys below. Slow at first, tendrils snaking through the trees, then thickening until it muffled everything. The air grew cooler, clammy against our skin, and sounds distorted. Our voices bounced oddly, swallowed by the mist. The forest transformed into a labyrinth, trees looming like ghosts in the haze. We added logs to the fire, flames dancing higher, casting an orange glow that pushed back the dark but created shifting shadows on the trunks beyond. "Spooky out here," Sarah said with a chuckle, pulling her jacket tighter. We passed around a flask of whiskey, sharing more stories, ghost tales from our childhoods, legends of the mountains. Mike mentioned the old logging camps, how workers vanished back in the day, blamed on accidents or bears. Or something else, he added with a wink. We laughed it off, but the fog pressed in, turning the world beyond our circle into an impenetrable wall. It was around 10 when we first heard it. We were mid-story, Tom recounting a fishing trip gone wrong, when a crunch broke the rhythm. Leaves compressing under weight, slow and deliberate, just beyond the Firelight's reach. We paused, heads tilting like dogs on alert. "What was that?" Sarah whispered. Another crunch, then a pause, then more footsteps, unmistakably, pacing along the edge of our glow. Not hurried, not stumbling, just measured like someone or something circling us. My heart picked up a subtle thrum in my chest. "Probably a deer," Mike said, shining his flashlight into the fog. The beam diffused, revealing nothing but swirling mist and vague tree shapes. We listened, frozen. The steps continued, crunch, pause, crunch, arcing around to our left. Tom stood, grabbing a stick from the fire, embers glowing at the end. "Hey, who's out there?" His voice echoed back faintly, distorted by the damp air. No answer. The pacing stopped for a moment, then resumed on the other side, as if assessing us. Unease settled over the group, quiet at first, like the fog itself. Sarah huddled closer to the fire, her face pale in the flames. "Sounds bipedal," I muttered, trying to sound rational. "Like a person. But who would be out here? No trails nearby, no lights in the distance. Bears walked on all fours, right? And this was rhythmic, intentional. We added more wood, the fire roaring now, heat blasting our faces while cold nipped at our backs. The footsteps persisted, never entering the light, always just beyond, 10 feet, maybe 15. They circled clockwise, then counter, pausing longest behind where we sat. I felt it then, a prickling on my neck like eyes boring in. "It's got to be an animal," Tom joked weakly, but his laugh fell flat. We strained to listen over the crackle, hearts pounding in unison. No growls, no snorts, just that insistent presence, patient as the night itself. We tried to ignore it, resuming talk in hushed tones, but the sounds intruded, pulling our attention. Around midnight, they grew bolder, closer now, leaves crunching right at the edge where shadows met light. I swear I felt breath thin, warm, faint on the back of my neck during one pause. I whipped around, flashlight in hand, but nothing. Just fog, swirling as if disturbed. "Did you feel that?" I asked, voice tight. Sarah nodded, eyes wide. Mike shook his head, but looked uneasy. Tom stood again, shouting into the dark. "Back off! We got knives!" Silence followed, thick and mocking. Then the steps resumed, unhurried. We retreated to our tents eventually, zipping flaps tight, but sleep was impossible. The pacing continued through the wee hours. Crunch, pause, crunch, circling endlessly. Inside, we whispered fears. Poachers? Squatters? Or those old stories of feral people, descendants of loggers gone wild, living in the hills? Grounded as we tried to stay, doubt crept in. What if the woods hid folks who'd opted out, watching intruders like us? The night stretched eternal, our flashlights dimming as batteries waned. We huddled in sleeping bags, knives clutched, ears attuned to every shift outside. The fog amplified isolation, making our camp feel like an island in a sea of unknown. Around 3 a.m., the steps stopped abruptly. Mid-stride, it seemed, leaving a vacuum that was worse. We waited, breath held, but nothing. Dawn came slow, gray light filtering through the mist, birds tentatively chirping. We emerged cautiously, scanning the ground. No tracks, none but our own boot print from the day before. The leaves around the perimeter looked undisturbed. No depressions, no signs of passage. "How's that possible?" Tom muttered, kicking at the earth. We searched wider, circling our sight like the footsteps had, but found only forest. Vines, roots, silence. The fog lifted gradually, revealing the woods as they were beautiful, indifferent. We packed up in quiet haste, rolling tents with minimal talk, the air heavier now, like the mountains held their breath. The hike out felt longer, every snap of twig underfoot echoing our night terrors. Back at the trucks, we drove in silence at first, then forced laughs about overactive imaginations and wildlife tricks. But the jokes rang hollow. That was 2 years ago. We don't talk much anymore. The group chat fizzled. Excuses for reunions piled up. I still camp sometimes, but never deep, never alone in those shadows. On quiet nights, back in my apartment, I hear it, faint crunches in the wind outside, a presence just beyond sight. The line between solitude and isolation blurs, and I wonder, what circled us that night? A person, lost or lurking, or the woods themselves, reminding us we're intruders? The dread lingers, subtle and sorrowful, a whisper that some places in Appalachia keep company you can't see, but always feel, waiting patient in the dark. Story 4. It started as a simple idea, something to rekindle what had been fading between Emily and me. We'd been together for 3 years, but the daily grind, my shifts at the warehouse, her long hours at the clinic, had worn us down to routines and silences. "Let's get away," she said one evening over takeout, scrolling through photos of misty mountains on her phone. "Just us, no distractions." I nodded, liking the sound of it. We both grew up in the shadow of the Appalachians, me in a small West Virginia town where the hills rolled like waves, her from a farmstead in eastern Kentucky. The woods were in our blood, familiar yet vast enough to swallow worries. We planned a weekend camping trip deep in the hollows, far from tourist trails, where the maps showed nothing but green expanses. "Romantic," Emily teased, packing candles and wine. I smiled, but deep down I wondered if the quiet would heal us or just amplify the cracks. We left early Saturday, driving my old pickup along winding roads that narrowed as we climbed. The air through the open windows shifted from humid valley warmth to a cooler, pine-scented breeze. Radio stations faded to static, replaced by the hum of tires on gravel. We stopped once for gas at a rundown station, where an old-timer behind the counter eyed our gear. "Heading deep?" he asked, chewing tobacco. "Watch the fog in them hollows, comes up quick, plays tricks." Emily laughed it off as local color, but his words stuck with me. Stories from my childhood about mist that hid old paths, whispers from miners lost in collapses. Folklore, I told myself. We turned off onto a dirt track, bumping over roots until the truck couldn't go farther. From there, it was a 2-mile hike, packs heavy with tent, food, and sleeping bags. The trail was faint, overgrown with ferns and wild rhododendrons, the ground soft underfoot from recent rains. Birds called from the canopy, and squirrels rustled in the leaves. But as we descended into the hollow, those sounds softened, muffled by the thickening trees. By mid-afternoon, we reached the spot, a secluded clearing beside a babbling stream, the water clear and cold over mossy rocks. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth, moss, and wildflowers, violets and trilliums dotting the banks. Towering oaks and maples ringed the area, their leaves forming a green dome that filtered sunlight into dappled patterns. "Perfect," Emily breathed, dropping her pack and spinning in place. We set up the tent easily, stakes sinking into the soft soil, then explored the nearby underbrush. Pushing through vines, we found remnants of old stone walls, crumbling foundations, perhaps from homesteads abandoned during the Depression. Lichens covered the rocks, and vines snaked through cracks like veins. "Wonder who lived here," I mused, tracing a weathered stone. Emily shivered playfully. "Ghosts of moonshiners, maybe." We laughed, holding hands as we wandered back, the stream's murmur a constant companion. It felt good, this ease between us, like the woods were breathing life back into what we'd lost. As the sun dipped toward the ridges, we gathered wood. Dry branches snapped from fallen logs, and built a fire in a ring of stones by the stream. Flames crackled to life, warming our faces as we cooked dinner. Foil packets of potatoes and sausage, sizzling over the coals. Emily uncorked the wine, and we sat on a blanket, toes dipping into the cool water. The light faded to a soft twilight, colors muting to grays and blues. We talked, really talked for the first time in months. About dreams we'd shelved, places we wanted to see, how we'd let life pull us apart. Her laugh echoed lightly off the trees, a sound I'd missed. The air grew heavier, scented with smoke and the faint sweetness of blooming honeysuckle. It was romantic, just as she'd hoped, the isolation wrapping around us like a cocoon. But as full dark settled, a mist rose from the ground, subtle at first, wisps curling around our ankles like smoke from a dying fire. The stream's babble seemed to amplify it, carrying the fog upstream in swirling eddies. The temperature dropped, and we pulled on sweatshirts, huddling closer to the flames. "Fog's coming in thick," Emily noted, glancing at the encroaching haze. It turned the woods into a blurred veil, trees fading into ghostly outlines. We finished eating, the fire's glow our only anchor, casting long shadows that danced unnaturally. That's when I first noticed the whisper's soft, indistinct murmurs, like distant conversations carried on the breeze. At first, I thought it was the wind through leaves or the stream playing tricks with echoes. Emily tilted her head. "You hear that?" We listened, faint voices, rising and falling, too muffled to make out words. "Probably animals," I said, though it didn't sound like any critter I knew. We shrugged it off, poking the fire to send sparks upward, but the murmurs lingered, a background hum that set my teeth on edge without me knowing why. The night deepened, the mist thickening until it swallowed everything beyond 10 feet. Our world shrank to the fire circle, the tent a dim shape in the haze. We shared the last of the wine, stories turning quieter, more intimate. Emily's laugh rang out again, clear and bright, cutting through the fog. But then the whispers shifted, grew clearer, somehow. Not words yet, but a cadence, mimicking the rise and fall of our talk. I paused mid-sentence, straining. "Sounds like us," Emily whispered, her smile fading. There was a faint echo of her laugh, carried back from the dark, distorted but recognizable. Then my name, Alex, whispered softly, as if from across the stream. My skin prickled. It wasn't an echo. The timing was off, delayed by seconds. We called out, "Hello? Anyone there?" Our voices bounced weakly, absorbed by the mist. No answer, but the murmurs continued, now weaving in snippets. Her laugh again, a word I'd said earlier about the old walls. Unease crept in, slow and cold, like the fog seeping through her clothes. We doused the fire, embers hissing in protest, and retreated to the tent, zipping the flap tight against the chill. Inside, the air was stuffy, our flashlights casting harsh beams on the nylon walls. We lay side by side in sleeping bags, holding hands, trying to laugh it off. "Wind tricks," Emily said, but her grip tightened. The whispers persisted outside, circling the tent, soft at first, then closer, as if whatever made them was drawing near. No distinct words, just that eerie rhythm, evoking a deep loneliness, like voices from forgotten time, pleading for connection. I felt in my chest, a quiet sorrow that wasn't mine. Around midnight, they pressed in, murmurs right against the fabric, as if lips were brushing the nylon. Emily gasped, shining her light out the mesh window. Nothing but swirling mist. "Alex, Emily," it came, faint but clear, our names intertwined with fragments of our dinner talk, the homesteads, our dreams. My heart hammered. How could it know? We huddled together, flashlights ready, beams piercing the dark, but revealing only fog and vague tree shapes. Panic built gradually, not in rushes but in layers like the mist itself. We whispered assurances, "It's nothing, just acoustics," but doubt gnawed. Stories from home surfaced in my mind, tales of hollows where the land held onto echoes, remnants of lives lost to floods or feuds, whispering to the living. Grounded as I tried to stay, the isolation amplified it. The vast woods pressing in, no help for miles. The murmurs grew insistent, circling tighter, sometimes pausing as if listening to our breaths. Emily trembled against me, her usual strength cracking. "Make it stop," she murmured. I wanted to go out, confront it, but the thought of stepping into that fog paralyzed me. What if it was people, feral squatters, watching from the trees? Or worse, something the mountains had birthed from solitude? The night dragged, hours marked by our watch's glow. 1 a.m., 2 a.m., the whispers unrelenting, pulling at memories. Her laugh twisted into a sigh. My words echoed back hollow. By 3 a.m., exhaustion warred with fear, our bodies tense as bowstrings. The murmurs evoked loss now, fragments that stirred old pains, like Emily's voice, but laced with sorrow from our fading connection. I felt exposed, as if the whispers peeled back layers, exposing vulnerabilities we'd ignored. We didn't sleep, just held each other, flashlights dimming. Dawn came reluctantly, gray light seeping through the mist, diluting it like watered ink. The whispers faded with the dark, vanishing into the stream's babble. We emerged cautiously, scanning the clearing. Empty, dew-kissed grass untouched, no footprints, no signs. The stone walls loomed in the distance, silent witnesses. We packed without words, rolling the tent with mechanical motions. The air still heavy, but the fog lifting to reveal the hollow as it was beautiful, indifferent. The hike out was silent, our hands brushing but not holding. Back in the truck, we drove without speaking, radio off, the mountains receding in the mirror. That was a year ago. Emily and I tried to move past it, but the whispers followed. In dreams, they'd return, pulling at forgotten moments, making shadows feel personal. We drifted apart eventually, the trip a fracture we couldn't mend. I avoid those hollows now, sticking to open trails, but on foggy nights, I hear them, soft murmurs in the wind, my name, her laugh, evoking that deep loneliness. The Appalachians keep their secrets, whispers from the mist that linger, reminding me some places aren't for romance. They're for the lost, and once they speak to you, they echo forever, a quiet sorrow that blurs the line between memory and haunting. Story 5. It had been almost a decade since college, and life had scattered us like leaves in the wind. I'd ended up in a cubicle in Pittsburgh, crunching numbers for an insurance firm that sucked the soul right out of you. Ryan was teaching high school history down in Charlotte, always complaining about the kids but loving it deep down. Lisa had gone corporate in Atlanta, climbing ladders I couldn't even see the top of, and Ben was the free spirit, bouncing between odd jobs in the Rockies, but he made it back east for this. The idea for the reunion came from an old group chat that lit up one random Tuesday. Remember that spot in the Appalachians? Let's do it again. We'd camped their senior year, a wild weekend of cheap beer and bad decisions, right before the real world hit. One last hurrah, Ryan texted. I hesitated. Work was piling up, and the drive was long, but something pulled at me. Maybe nostalgia, or just needing to feel connected again. We set the date for late September, when the air turns crisp but the leaves haven't fully turned. The drive from Pittsburgh took me through familiar territory at first. Interstates cutting through rolling hills, but soon veered onto narrower roads, the kind flanked by endless trees that crowd the shoulders like silent watchers. I met the others at a gas station in Elkins, West Virginia, where we stocked up on snacks and firewood. Hugs and backslaps all around, the years melting away in laughter. You look old, man, Ben teased, punching my arm. Lisa rolled her eyes, her hair shorter now, practical. We piled into 2 cars and headed deeper, the pavement giving way to gravel that rattled our bones. The forest thickened, hemlocks and oaks intertwining overhead, blocking out chunks of sky. Sunlight dappled the road in patches, but shadows lingered longer here, even in midday. We talked through open windows, catching up on marriages, divorces, kids none of us had yet. The air smelled of pine and earth, a clean sharpness that made the city feel like a distant dream. After an hour, we turned onto an old fire trail, overgrown with weeds, the cars bumping over roots until we parked at a dead end. From there, it was a short hike, packs slung, following a faint path we'd half remembered from before. The clearing opened up suddenly, wide and grassy, ringed by dense forest like a bowl carved from the woods. It was bigger than I recalled, maybe 100 yards across, with a flat spot perfect for tents. Wildflowers dotted the edges, goldenrod and asters swaying gently. And in the center, remnants of an old fire ring, charred stones overgrown with moss. "Home sweet home," Ryan declared, dropping his gear. We set up quickly, 4 tents in a loose semicircle, a tarp strung between trees for shade. Ben gathered kindling while Lisa unpacked the cooler, pulling out sandwiches and beers. The sun dipped low as we worked, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, the ridges silhouetted like jagged teeth. We reminisced. That time Ben got lost for an hour, or when Lisa scared us with ghost stories around the fire. Laughter echoed off the trees, oddly sharp in the open space. It felt right, this bubble of camaraderie amid the vastness. As dusk settled, we built the bonfire, flames leaping high, crackling against the cooling air. We sat on logs, passing bottles, the heat warming our faces while the chill nipped at our backs. Stars emerged overhead, brighter than city lights allowed, and for a while, the world felt small and manageable. But as night fully claimed the clearing, something shifted. The usual symphony of the woods, crickets chirping, owls hooting, leaves rustling, faded to nothing. It wasn't abrupt. It crept in, like the silence after a conversation dies. Our voices carried farther, echoing back from the treeline in a way that made us pause mid-sentence. "Quiet out here," Lisa noted, tilting her head. Ben shrugged. "Yeah, probably the time of year. Animals bedding down." We kept talking, stories turning to deeper stuff, regrets, what-ifs, but the stillness pressed in unnatural like a weight on the chest. No wind stirred the branches. Even the fire's crackle seemed muted. Around 10, we added more wood, flames roaring brighter, casting long shadows that danced across the grass toward the forest edge. Ryan pulled out his guitar, strumming old tunes from college, but the notes hung lonely in the air, unaccompanied. We sang along half-heartedly, but soon lapsed into quiet, staring into the embers. The silence deepened, a void that swallowed sound, making our breaths seem loud. It was around midnight when the first break came, a single snap from the treeline, sharp as a gunshot in the hush. We all froze, heads snapping toward the dark. "What was that?" I whispered, heart jolting. "A branch breaking, maybe under an animal's weight." Ben grabbed a lantern, its beam cutting into the shadows, illuminating trunks and underbrush, but revealing nothing moving. "Deer, probably," Ryan said, though his voice lacked conviction. We waited, ears straining, but the quiet returned, thicker now, as if the woods were listening back. Jokes followed, nervous ones about Bigfoot or hillbillies, but they fell flat, echoes mocking us. We poked the fire, huddling closer, the glow our island in the Black Sea. Hours passed like that, talk sputtering out, replaced by uneasy glances at the perimeter. Then, around 1 a.m., another sound, a faint drag like something heavy being pulled through the underbrush. Not footsteps, slower, more laborious, stopping abruptly just out of sight. My skin crawled. It evoked images of a body being hauled, though I pushed the thought away. "Hear that?" Lisa hissed. We did. The lantern beams swept again. Nothing. No eye shine, no shapes. Just the dense wall of trees, impassive. Unease built slowly, a quiet tide rising. One by one, we felt it, that prickling sense of being watched, hair standing on end like static charge. Ben stood, circling the fire with his light, calling out, "Hello? Anyone there?" His voice echoed oddly, coming back distorted from multiple directions. No response. The drags came again, intermittent from different sides. Left, then right, as if whatever was paced the clearing's edge. Not aggressive, not charging in, just persistent, patient. Ryan suggested bears, but bears don't drag. They lumber. Deer? Too deliberate. We added logs, the fire blazing high, but the sounds continued, closer each time, stopping just beyond the light's fade. In the tent later, I crawled in around 2 a.m., the others following suit, the absence gnawed. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the void broken only by those drags. They circled now, rhythmic almost like a ritual. My mind raced. Old legends from these hills whispered in bars back home. Feral people, descendants of settlers gone wild, lurking in the backwoods, drawn to noise but shunning light. Or loggers lost to accidents, their spirits, or bodies dragging through eternity. Grounded thoughts warred with fear. Poachers? Squatters? But no voices, no demands. Just presence insistent. The night stretched, sleep a distant hope. Every drag pulled at my nerves, imagining eyes in the dark, fixed on our tents. Lisa whispered from hers. "You guys hear it too?" Affirmatives murmured back. We clutched flashlights, knives nearby, but venturing out felt suicidal in that silence. Around 3 a.m., the drags paused longest behind my tent. Close enough I swore I heard breathing, shallow and ragged. I froze, pulse thundering, waiting for a hand on the fabric. Nothing. Then it moved on, the sound fading only to return elsewhere. Dawn crept in gray and slow, light filtering through the canopy, the silence lifting slightly with faint bird calls. We emerged one by one, faces drawn, scanning the clearing. No signs at first, grass undisturbed, fire pit cold. But as we packed, bins spotted them. Scuff marks around the edge, long drags in the soft earth, as if the forest had tried to encroach overnight, pulling itself closer. Not animal tracks, too broad, too erratic. They ringed us completely, starting from the tree lean and stopping inches from where our tents had stood. "What the hell?" Ryan muttered, kicking at one. We searched wider. No footprints leading away, just those marks vanishing into the underbrush. We broke camp hastily, stuffing gear with minimal talk, the air heavier now, like the woods held their breath. The hike-out felt watched, every snap under our boots echoing the night. Back at the cars, we drove in silence at first, then forced chatter about work, anything but what happened. "Probably just wildlife," Lisa said finally, but her eyes avoided ours. That was 5 years ago. We tried to stay in touch, emails, occasional calls, but the reunion became a shadow, unspoken. I don't camp anymore, sticking to hotels with locked doors. But the void follows. On peaceful nights, the silence deepens, turning vigils into waits. What lingered in that clearing, unseen and patient? A person twisted by isolation? Or the mountains themselves, guarding secrets in the quiet spaces? The dread sits subtle, a sorrowful confusion that stirs with every still moment, whispering that some reunions awaken things best left sleeping, and once stirred, they never truly rest. Story 6. The family camping trip was a ritual as old as I could remember, starting back when Dad would load up the station wagon with tents and coolers, Mom packing sandwiches that always tasted better in the woods. We'd head into the Appalachians every summer, staking out familiar spots along the Shenandoah or near the Smokies. Places with marked trails and fire rings worn smooth by generations. But that year, 2017, things felt different. Dad had passed the winter before, his heart giving out quietly in his sleep, and Mom insisted we keep the tradition alive. For him, she said, her voice steady but her eyes distant. My sister Kara, home from college, suggested a new spot, some lesser-known valley she'd read about online, deeper in, away from the crowds. "It'll be an adventure," she argued, and I, at 28, stuck in a rut of bartending shifts in Roanoke, agreed. Little brother Tim, just 16 and full of teenage bravado, was all for it. So we went, 4 of us crammed into Mom's SUV, gear rattling in the back as we veered off the highways on a winding gravel roads that snaked through the hills like veins in old stone. The drive took longer than expected, the roads narrowing until branches scraped the sides of the car. The air through the cracked windows carried that deep forest scent, pine resin mixed with damp soil, invigorating at first. We passed faded signs for old mining towns, rusted relics from another era, and the trees grew thicker, their canopies blotting out the sky in patches. "This is real backcountry," Kara said excitedly, checking her phone until signal bars vanished. Mom hummed old hymns to fill the quiet, while Tim fiddled with his earbuds. I drove, eyes on the ruts, feeling a mix of anticipation and that subtle pull of the unknown, the way these mountains always made you feel small, watched by something ancient. We parked at a pull-off where the road dead-ended into underbrush, slung our packs, and hiked in about 1.5 miles. The path was faint, more animal trail than human, rolling over gentle hills dotted with boulders. Thick undergrowth flanked us, ferns chest-high, vines twisting like ropes, hiding small caves that gaped like dark mouths and streams that trickled unseen. Sunlight pierced through in shafts, warming our faces, and insects buzzed lazily, a constant hum that blended with our footsteps. We arrived mid-morning, the glade opening up like a secret. A sunny patch of grass, maybe 30 yards wide, bordered by rolling hills that funneled down into wooded valleys. Wildflowers nodded in the breeze, daisies and black-eyed Susans, and a small stream curved along one edge, its water clear over pebbled beds. "This is it," Mom declared, dropping her pack with a sigh. We pitched camp efficiently, a tradition honed over years. The big family tent for Mom and Kara, smaller ones for Tim and me. Stakes sank easily into the soft earth, and we strung a clothesline between trees for wet gear. Tim scampered off to explore, yelling about a cave he'd spotted in the undergrowth, while Kara helped Mom unpack the cooler. Hot dogs, Esmore supplies, cans of soda, sweating in the heat. I built the fire ring, stacking stones from the stream, the cool water soothing on my hands. Laughter filled the air as we settled in. Tim challenging Kara to a rock-skipping contest, Mom snapping photos with her old camera. It felt healing, this normalcy amid grief, the sun high and the woods alive with that buzzing symphony. We hiked a bit after lunch, following the stream uphill to where it pooled in a natural basin, perfect for dipping feet. No other souls around, not a footprint or candy wrapper, just us and the vast, breathing forest. As afternoon waned, the light shifted, slanting longer through the trees. Shadows lengthened across the glade, pooling under bushes like spilled ink, turning the undergrowth into a murky labyrinth. We returned to camp, gathering firewood. Dry branches snapped from low limbs, avoiding the thickets where thorns lurked. The air cooled subtly, carrying a hint of moisture from hidden streams. Tim complained about bug bites, slapping at mosquitoes, while Kara started the fire, flames flickering to life as the sun dipped behind the ridges. We roasted hot dogs on sticks, the sizzle mixing with our chatter. Stories of Dad's infamous fishing fails, how he'd once hooked his own hat. Mom smiled softly, the firelight softening the lines on her face. Marshmallows followed, gooey and charred, sandwiched between graham crackers. It was idyllic, that golden hour, the sky streaking purple and orange. But as twilight deepened, unease nibbled at the edges. The insect buzz faded, replaced by a quieter hush. Birds stopped calling, and the stream's trickle seemed distant. "Kinda still out here," Tim noted, glancing at the tree lean. We laughed it off, attributing it to the remote spot, but I felt it a subtle weight, like the woods were settling in to watch. Night fell proper around 8, the darkness absolute under the canopy's veil. Stars pricked through overhead, but the glade felt enclosed, the hills rising like walls. We kept the fire going, adding logs that popped and sparked, our faces glowing in the orange light. Stories turned to whispers, ghost tales from childhood, legends of the hills. Kara mentioned the feral people, those old yarns about families gone wild in the backwoods after the mines closed, living like animals. "Just stories," Mom said firmly, but her eyes darted to the shadows. Tim scoffed, but I saw him edge closer to the flames. Around 10, we doused the fire to coals, crawling into tents with flashlights and zip flaps. Inside mine, the nylon walls muffled the world, my sleeping bag warm against the cooling ground. Sleep came slow. I lay listening to the absence. The no crickets, no owls, just our family's soft breath from nearby tents. It was unnerving, that void, like the forest held its tongue. Sometime after midnight, the first rustle came, Not the quick scamper of a squirrel or rabbit, but slower, more calculated, like something pushing through the undergrowth deliberately. I sat up, heart ticking faster, straining in the dark. It came from a tree lean, maybe 20 yards out, leaves brushing, twigs shifting under weight. Probably a deer, I whispered to myself, but it didn't sound right, too low, too methodical. I unzipped the flap a crack, shining my flashlight beam into the night. The light cut through, illuminating ferns and bushes, but nothing stirred. Eyes reflected briefly, small, close to the ground, blinking out before I could focus. Not deer. Those eyes were higher, wider set. These were lower, perhaps knee-height, vanishing into the thicket. Unease coiled in my gut, but I zipped back up, telling myself it was raccoons or possums. Sleep evaded me now. Every few minutes, another rustle, circling the glade, pausing, then moving on. I heard Tim stir in his tent, a whispered, "What was that?" to no one. The night wore on, the movements growing bolder. By 1 a.m., they encircled us, rustles from multiple directions, like a pack coordinating without sound. No barks, no growls, just that invasive presence, brushing closer. Mom's voice came soft from her tent. "You hear it too?" We all did. Flashlights flicked on, beams dancing through mesh windows. But the undergrowth swallowed the light, revealing only swaying ferns. Kara suggested bears, but bears crashed through. This was stealthy, calculated. Tim joked about Bigfoot, but his laugh cracked. We huddled in our bags, whispering assurances. It's nothing, wildlife, but fear gripped tighter. Around 2 a.m., the rustles neared the tents. Brushes against the outer walls, faint but deliberate, like fingers trailing the fabric. My heart thudded. I peeked out again, beam trembling. There, fleeting shapes in the beam's edge, hunched, low to the ground, melting into shadows before I could make sense. Not animals I knew, too elusive, too human-like in posture, but smaller, twisted. They darted between bushes, silent as ghosts, presence heavy despite the quiet. Panic built in layers, not sudden but relentless, like the encroaching dark. We called out softly, "Hello? Who's there?" But our voices echoed back hollow, unanswered. The movements continued, circling tighter, sometimes pausing right outside, where I swore I felt the tent dip slightly under pressure. Images flooded my mind. Those feral legends, people devolved into shadow dwellers, drawn by our fire's scent, watching from hidden caves. Or squatters, desperate and deranged. Grounded reason fought back, maybe wild dogs or boars, but the silence unnerved most. No snorts, no pause, just that deliberate intrusion. Tim whimpered once, and Mom shushed him, her voice steady but strained. Kara clutched her phone, no signal, whispering prayers. I gripped my multi-tool, blade out, useless against the unseen. Hours dragged, 3 a.m., 4 a.m. The rustles intermittent but closer each time, brushing, probing. Sleep was impossible. We lay vigilant, breaths synchronized in fear. The glade a pressure cooker of dread. Dawn broke gray and slow, light seeping through the canopy, diluting the shadows. The rustles faded with the dark, vanishing into the undergrowth as birds tentatively chirped. We emerged one by one, faces pale, scanning the glade. No evidence at first, tents untouched, fire pit cold. But as we packed, Tim spotted trampled ferns around the perimeter, paths crushed low, like bodies had crawled through, encircling our sight. Not animal trails, too narrow, too purposeful, leading into thickets and vanishing. We searched briefly, small caves nearby empty, streams innocent. "Let's go," Mom said, voice final. We broke camp hastily, stuffing gear with shaking hands, the air heavier now, buzzing insects returning like nothing happened. The hike out felt eternal, every rustle in the leaves making us flinch, glancing back at the valleys. That was the last family trip. We've skipped the tradition since, opting for cabins or beaches instead. Mom doesn't talk about it. Kara busies herself with school. Tim buries it in video games. But those shadows creep into my thoughts, unbidden, a grounded terror that turns every dark rustle into an invitation. On quiet nights in my apartment, I hear them, faint brushes in the wind, drawing something closer from hidden depths. These ancient hills hold secrets, presences patient and unseen, and once they've brushed your world, they linger, a sorrowful confusion that blurs solitude into something far more invasive, waiting in the undergrowth for the light to fade again. Story 7. I'd always found solace in the woods, a way to unplug from the chaos of everyday life that no amount of therapy or bar tabs could match. After the layoff from the mill in Huntington, another casualty of automation, I felt unmoored, drifting through days in my cramped apartment, scrolling job sites until my eyes burned. The mountains called to me, those ancient Appalachians that had cradled my childhood in their shadowed valleys. Solo camping seemed like the answer. No distractions, no people, just me and the raw pulse of nature. I packed light, a backpack tent, sleeping bag, MREs, a flask of whiskey for the cold nights, and a journal to sort my thoughts. No gun. I wasn't a hunter, and the real threats out there weren't the kind you could blast away. I chose a spot deep in the Pisgah National Forest, off a forgotten trail I'd marked on an old map app before signal vanished. Deep Appalachia, the locals called it, where the mist hangs like a veil and the ridges hide secrets older than the coal seams. I drove out at dawn, the highway giving way to twisting roads flanked by dense foliage, the air thickening with that earthy promise as I climbed. The hike-in was peaceful, almost meditative, about 4 miles from the gravel lot where I left my truck, following a narrow path overgrown with laurel and ferns that brushed my legs like whispering fingers. Birds sang overhead, warblers and thrushes, their calls echoing off the hills in a chorus that made the world feel alive and welcoming. Sunlight dappled the ground through the canopy, warming the damp soil under my boots. The ravine appeared gradually, a deep gash in the earth to my left, overgrown with vines and fallen logs, its bottom lost in shadow even at midday. I chose a spot nearby, a small flat area on the lip, where the ground was soft with pine needles and the view opened to rolling valleys misted in blue haze. Perfect isolation, no trails crossing, no signs of recent campers. I pitched the tent facing away from the drop, stakes sinking easily, and gathered firewood from the underbrush. Dry branches snapped clean, avoiding the rot that lurked in damper spots. As I worked, a faint odor wafted up, earthy decay, like wet leaves rotting deeper than usual, mingled with something sharper, almost metallic. I paused, sniffing the air, but it dissipated on the breeze. Natural, I figured. Forests are full of decomposition, cycles of life and death. Mushrooms sprouted from a nearby log, their caps pale and fleshy, and I chalked it up to that. Shaking it off, I built a small fire ring and sat back, boiling water for coffee, the steam rising in lazy curls. The journal stayed closed. For now, the quiet was enough. Afternoon slipped by in a haze of small tasks, filtering water from a trickle seeping into the ravine, exploring the immediate area without venturing too far. The undergrowth was thick down there, tangles of briars and fallen trees hiding what might be old creek beds or animal dens. Birds continued their song, but as the sun angled lower, their calls thinned, replaced by the occasional rustle of leaves. I ate an early dinner, a heated MRE of chili mac, washed down with black coffee, the flavors grounding me. The odor returned faintly as I ate, drifting up from the ravine like an exhalation. Stronger now, but still dismissible. Maybe a dead animal down there, a deer or raccoon bloating in the heat. Forests rot. It's part of their beauty, the way they reclaim everything. I added wood to the fire, flames crackling to life as dusk settled, painting the trees in shades of indigo. The mist rose then, common in these hollows, swirling low along the ground and softening the edges of the world. I sipped from the flask, the whiskey burning warm in my throat, and stared into the embers, thoughts wandering to the layoff, the empty apartment waiting back home. For the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of peace, the isolation a balm rather than a burden. Night came on slow, the way it does in deep woods, where darkness gathers in layers rather than falling all at once. The temperature dropped, and I pulled on a fleece, huddling closer to the fire's glow. Stars emerged overhead, pinpricks in the velvet black, but the canopy blocked most, leaving the clearing feeling enclosed, intimate. The odor intensified with the cool air, no longer faint but insistent, mingling with the campfire smoke in a way that turned my stomach. It wasn't just decay now, cloying almost sweet underneath like overripe fruit mixed with soil after rain. I stood, flashlight in hand, sweeping the beam toward the ravine. The light pierced the mist, illuminating vines and roots twisting down the slope, but nothing obvious. No carcass, no source. The air felt heavier, the scent circling my sight like an unseen fog, wrapping around me. Unease prickled at the edges of my mind, but I pushed it down, overactive imagination, solo nerves. I doused the fire early, embers hissing in protest, and crawled into the tent, zipping the flap tight. Inside, the nylon walls muffled the world, my sleeping bag a cocoon against the chill. I lay there, breathing steady, willing sleep to come. The journal entry could wait till morning. But around midnight, the smell returned with a vengeance, seeping through the vents like smoke. Thicker now, coating my tongue with each breath, evoking images of turned earth and forgotten graves. I sat up, heart ticking faster, flashlight beam dancing on the tent ceiling. No sounds accompanied it. No rustles, no footsteps, just that pervasive rot, insistent and close. I unzipped the door a sliver, peering out. The mist had thickened, blanketing the ground in white, the ravine a yawning void beyond. The odor peaked around 1 a.m., cloying and foul, as if something breathed it right outside. My mind raced. What if it was methane from a bog down there? Or worse, a body some hiker lost years ago, unearthed by erosion. Stories from home flickered, tales of old burial grounds in these hills, unmarked after floods washed them away, or miners' remains from collapses seeping into the soil. Grounded as I tried to be, doubt crept in. I called out softly, "Hello." My voice sounded small, swallowed by the night. No answer. The scent circled, now stronger on one side, then the other, like an entity probing. I retreated deeper into the tent, zipping tight against the invisible assault, but it seeped in anyway, clinging to fabric coating my throat. Sleep evaded me. I lay rigid, flashlight clutched, mind painting horrors, forgotten remains stirring in the ravine, gases rising like spirits. The hours blurred, my watch's glow marking time, 1:30, 2:15, 3 o'clock. The odor waxed and waned, but never left, a quiet harbinger that turned the tent into a trap. No visuals, no noises, just that smell, evoking buried secrets, making every breath a reminder of decay. I thought of Dad's stories from his logging days, how the woods held on to death, scents lingering where animals or people met their end. Was this a warning? The mountains exhaling their hidden rot? Panic-edged and slow, not screaming but suffocating like the mist outside. I sipped whiskey to steady nerves, but it soured on my tongue, tainted. By 4 a.m., exhaustion warred with fear, visions of climbing down the ravine flashing, finding bones, or worse, something fresh. But the dark held me back. Solo meant no backup, no one to call. Dawn came gray, light filtering through mist, diluting the scent gradually. It faded as the sun rose, birds resuming their song like nothing happened. I emerged, scanning. No signs, just dewy grass and empty ravine. The air cleared, but the smell clung to my clothes, faint but stubborn. I broke camp fast, stuffing gear with shaking hands, fleeing down the trail. The hike out felt longer, every whiff of earth stirring memory. Back home, I watched everything twice, but tests at a clinic showed nothing. No allergens, no toxins. Psychosomatic, the doc said. But that decay returns in nightmares, a quiet invasion that stirs beneath the surface. On still nights, I catch it in the air, questioning what lurks in those secluded places, remains, secrets, or something the hills breathe out to remind us we're temporary. The dread lingers, sorrowful and confusing, turning unplugging into a deeper isolation, one that whispers of hidden horrors waiting patient below. Story 8. It was supposed to be a simple getaway, just my cousin Nate and me escaping the grind for a long weekend in the Appalachians. We'd grown up together in a small town outside Asheville, North Carolina, spending summers chasing fireflies and listening to our granddad's tales of the mountains, how the ridges held on old ways, how some lights in the dark weren't from folks at all. But we were adults now, him 32 with a construction job that beat him down daily, me 30 and stuck in retail management, both needing a reset. Nate suggested a ridgetop spot he'd found on a hiking forum, high up in the Nantahala wilderness, promising killer views and total solitude. No cell service, no crowds, he texted, attaching a blurry photo of hazy valleys. I was in, anything to clear my head. We packed our trucks with gear, tents, cooler, cameras since Nate was into photography, and met at a trailhead off a dirt road that wound like a snake through the hills. The drive up was quiet at first, radio fading to static, replaced by the crunch of gravel and the scent of pine seeping through the vents. The hike to the site took a couple hours, packs heavy but the trail steady, climbing through switchbacks flanked by rhododendrons thick as walls. The air was crisp, even in late summer, carrying that clean mountain bite that makes you feel alive. Birds flitted overhead, and we spotted a deer once, frozen in a shaft of sunlight before bounding away. As we crested the ridge, the view opened up breathtaking. Endless valleys rolling out below, shrouded in blue haze, peaks fading into the distance like waves frozen in time. The site itself was a flat outcrop, grassy and open, with a natural ledge for the views and enough trees on the backside for windbreak. This is gold. Nate grinned, dropping his pack. We set up camp efficiently, his tent facing the drop-off for sunrise shots, mine tucked near the trees. We gathered firewood from down branches, careful not to strip live ones, and strung a bare bag high. Daytime passed idyllic. Hiking along the ridge trail, Nate snapping photos of wildflowers and distant thunderheads building on the horizon, me just soaking in the vastness. We ate sandwiches on the ledge, legs dangling over the abyss, talking about life, his stalled relationship, my dead-end job, how the city felt like a trap closing slow. Laughter echoed off the rocks, the sun warm on our faces. It felt restorative, this high perch above the world. As sunset approached, the transformation began subtle. The light shifted golden, painting the valleys in warm hues, but the haze thickened below, swallowing details until the land looked like an ocean of mist. We built the fire as the horizon swallowed the sun, flames crackling to life in a ring of stones we'd arranged. The air cooled fast up here, wind whispering through the pines behind us, carrying faint scents of earth and distant rain. Nate pulled out his camera for twilight shots, the sky streaking purple and crimson. We cooked steaks over the coals, real ones from a butcher back home, washed down with cold beers from the cooler. The fire's glow pushed back the encroaching dark, our faces illuminated while the valleys plunged into shadow. Stars emerged one by one, brighter than I'd seen in years, the Milky Way a faint band overhead. We talked quieter now, stories turning to granddad's legends, will-o'-the-wisps in the swamps, lights leading travelers astray in the old days. Folklore, Nate dismissed, but with a smile. Around 9, the wind died, the night settling still, our fire the only movement. That's when we noticed the first flickers. Far off in the valley below, dim lights winking into existence like embers stirred in ash. At first, just one or two, pale and yellowish, too steady for lightning bugs, but erratic in pattern. Other campers? I suggested, leaning forward. Nate grabbed binoculars, scanning the haze. Maybe. Hard to tell distance down there. We watched curious, assuming hikers with headlamps or fires in a hollow we couldn't see. No paths led straight up from there. At least none on our map, but the wilderness was vast, full of unmarked ways. The lights multiplied slowly. 3, then 5, dancing without rhythm, appearing and vanishing like signals. Nate snapped photos, long exposures capturing streaks in the dark. "Cool effect," he said, but his tone shifted as hours passed. Midnight came, our fire burning low, and the flickers grew bolder, more numerous, perhaps a dozen now, weaving patterns that defied wind or terrain. They drew nearer, ascending the slope invisible below the ridge, silent and purposeful. No sounds carried up, no voices, no crackles of companion fires. Just cold illumination bobbing through the mist. Unease crept in gradual, like the haze itself rising. We added wood, flames roaring higher, but the lights persisted, undeterred. "They're coming up," Nate whispered, binoculars steady. Through them, vague shapes outlined, tall, perhaps human, carrying lanterns. But no warmth reached us, no orange glow like our fire. These were pale, ghostly, hovering low to the ground at times. My heart raced subtle, a quiet thrum as we whispered plans. Stay put, keep the fire bright, wait for dawn. Stories resurfaced, Granddad's warnings about corpse lights, or feral folk using signals in the deep woods, luring or warning. Grounded reason fought, maybe bioluminescence, swamp gas igniting, or distant poachers. But no swamps here, and poachers wouldn't climb silent toward strangers. We doused the fire eventually, embers smothered to avoid drawing them, hiding in shadows near our tents. The ridge felt exposed now, a beacon weed foolishly lit. The lights advanced closer, outlining underbrush on the slope below, branches flickering into view as if passed by lanterns held low. They halted at the ridge's edge, perhaps 50 yards out, hovering like eyes in the void, multiplying to 20 or more. No heat, no sound, just that eerie dance, evoking profound isolation, as if the valleys exhaled something ancient seeking company. We endured huddled in darkness, flashlights off to avoid notice, breath shallow. Nate gripped a hatchet, me my knife, plans murmured. Run if they crest, scream to startle. But they never did, just hovered, winking in patterns that felt deliberate, watching our silhouette against the stars perhaps. Hours blurred. 1 a.m., 2 a.m., the cold seeping into bones, dread building in layers of confusion and sorrow. Why us? What summoned them? Images haunted, lost souls from old wrecks, or living hermits marking territory with cold flames. The lights evoked loneliness deeper than our getaway intended, mirroring the emptiness we'd fled. Sleep impossible, we waited vigilant, the ridge a thin line between us and whatever ascended. Dawn came reluctant, gray light bleeding over the horizon, mist lifting to reveal empty valleys below. No fires, no figures, no traces on the slopes. The flickers vanished with the dark, as if dissolved. We broke camp in silence, packing hasty, the views now ominous rather than inspiring. Descending the trail, we scanned for signs, trampled grass, lantern remnants, but found only pristine wilderness, valleys innocent in morning light. Back at the trucks, we drove without much talk, forcing jokes about ghost hunters or UFOs. But the ease was gone. Calls tapered after, excuses for future trips mounting. That was 4 years ago. I avoid ridges now, sticking to valleys with roads nearby. But those flickers linger in memory, a subtle dread turning starry nights into watches. On clear evenings, I scan horizons, pondering what stirs in the deep woods, signals from the lost, or something patient seeking the living. The isolation haunts, a sorrowful confusion that blurs escape into entrapment, whispering that some lights in Appalachia aren't meant to guide, but to draw you down into the haze forever. Story 9. It was meant to be our reset. Sarah and I had been together 5 years, but the last one had been rough. Her long nursing shifts during the tail end of the pandemic, my freelance graphic work drying up until I was taking any gig that paid. We barely saw each other awake. Conversations reduced to texts and tired nods over coffee. "We need to get out," she said one rainy March evening, scrolling through photos of misty creeks on her phone. Just us running water, no signal. I remembered how the sound of a creek always calmed her as a kid, growing up near the New River in Virginia. I grew up in the same part of the world, where every hollow had its own stream singing over rocks, and the mountains felt like they were breathing slow around you. We picked a spot deep in the George Washington National Forest, a lowland area off an old logging road that barely showed on maps anymore. No trails, no people, the forum post promised. We loaded my Jeep with the tent, sleeping bags, a cooler, and her little Bluetooth speaker for the drive, though we both knew we'd leave it silent once we arrived. The road narrowed after we left the highway, twisting through valleys where fog clung to the treetops even in daylight. We turned onto gravel, then dirt, branches scraping the roof until the track petered out at a pull-off hidden by laurel thickets. From there, it was a half-mile hike, packs heavy, but the path easy, descending gently into forested lowlands where the air grew damper, richer with moss and leaf mold. The creek announced itself before we saw it, a steady, soothing babble that grew louder with every step. When we broke through the underbrush, the sight stopped us. A clear, winding stream, maybe 15 feet across, tumbling over smooth stones and fallen logs, bordered by ancient hemlocks and maples whose roots dipped into the flow like fingers. The water was dark in the deeper pools, reflecting the canopy overhead, but it sang constant, a gentle rush that felt like the mountains exhaling. "This is perfect," Sarah whispered, her face softening in a way I hadn't seen in months. We arrived just as dusk gathered, clouds heavy with threatened rain. So we worked fast, tent pitched on a flat rise 10 yards from the bank, stakes driven deep into soft earth, rain fly secured. We gathered wood quickly, dry branches from higher ground, and built a small fire as the first drops pattered on leaves. Dinner was simple, ramen heated over the flames, bread and cheese, hot tea from a thermos. We sat on a log facing the creek, the fire between us and the water, its glow dancing on the surface. The babble was everything we'd hoped, constant, rhythmic, washing away the static of daily life. We really talked about the distance that had grown between us, how we'd let exhaustion become habit. Sarah's hand found mine across the flames, her fingers cold but steady. Rain started in earnest then, a soft hiss on the canopy, drumming on our tarp overhead. We laughed about getting wet anyway, about how the creek sounded louder now, like it was rising to meet the storm. Around 10, we banked the fire, crawled into the tent, and zipped up against the damp. Inside, the nylon walls amplified the rain's rhythm, but underneath it all was the creek, steady, soothing, lulling us towards sleep. Sarah fell off first, her breathing evening out beside me. I lay listening to the water, feeling the tension of the past year loosen in my chest. This was why we'd come. This was healing. But sometime after midnight, I checked my watch later around 12:40, I woke with a start. The rain had eased to a drizzle, the forest quieter, but the creek's sound had changed. It was still babbling, still constant, but the cadence felt different. Subtle at first, like a melody shifting underneath the surface noise. I lay still, straining to place it. Words? No, that was ridiculous. Just pareidolia, the brain making patterns from random sound. I shifted closer to Sarah, her warmth grounding me, and tried to drift again. But the murmurs persisted, indistinct at first, rising and falling with the water's flow, insistent in a way white noise shouldn't be. I sat up quietly, unzipping the door a few inches to listen better. The creek looked innocent in the faint moonlight filtering through clouds. Dark water, sliding over rocks, foam flecking the eddies. Yet the sound carried fragments now. Soft syllables woven into the rush, too rhythmic to be natural. Sarah stirred beside me. "You okay?" she mumbled. "Hear that?" I whispered. She listened, head tilted. "It's just the water," she said, but her voice lacked certainty. We laughed it off, tired minds playing tricks, and zipped the door again. Sleep came fitfully after that, the murmurs threading through dreams of drowning in endless dark flow. By 2 a.m. we were both awake, sitting up in our bags, flashlights off to save batteries. The murmurs had grown clearer, still soft but unmistakable, fragments surfacing like bubbles. Our names, first, Sarah, carried on a higher rush, Alex, in a lower gurgle. Not loud, not shouted, just woven into the creek's voice, patient and persistent. My skin prickled. How could water form words? We moved the tent farther from the bank, dragging it 10 feet uphill, laughing nervously about haunted plumbing. But the sounds followed, echoing in our ears even inside the nylon walls. The creek seemed to slow in places, pooling darkly under overhanging roots, as if concentrating to speak. Cautions came next, soft warnings in that liquid cadence. Go. And leave. Repeated gently, like advice from an old friend. No malice, just urgency, evoking buried histories. The way these mountains hold on to floods, drownings, old tragedies washed downstream and never quite gone. Sarah clutched my arm, her nurse's calm cracking. It's in my head, she whispered, but we both knew it wasn't. The auditory intrusion was shared, intimate, pulling at memories we'd rather keep submerged. Arguments unspoken, distances grown, fears of drifting apart forever. We didn't sleep again. Huddled together, we listened as the murmurs circled themes. Loss, regret, warnings tailored too perfectly to us. Stay together. One stretch seemed to say, water rushing over a fallen log. Don't drift. In a quieter pool. No visuals accompanied it, just sound, invasive and deliberate, making the creek feel alive in a way that chilled deeper than fear. Stories from home resurfaced in my mind. Granddad talking about speaking waters in certain hollows, how creeks carried voices of the drowned, warning the living or calling them down. Folklore I'd always thought, but here in the dark, with rain dripping from leaves and the flow endless outside, it felt plausible. Sarah recorded on her phone, desperate for proof, but playback later would show only normal babble. The night stretched, hours marked by the creek's patient voice, dreams bleeding into waking when exhaustion pulled us under briefly, visions of dark water rising, whispers drowning thought. Dawn came gray and slow, clouds parting to let pale light filter through. The murmurs faded with the dark, the creek restoring its innocent song as birds began to call. We broke camp in silence, packing wet gear with mechanical motions, the stream sparkling harmlessly in morning sun. No evidence remained, just damp earth and flowing water. We hiked out shaken, hands brushing but not holding, the babble following us partway before fading into forest noise. That was 2 years ago. Sarah and I tried to salvage things after, but the murmurs had exposed cracks too wide. We parted quietly, no drama, just drift. I avoid creeks now, sticking to high ridges or silent lakes. But in quiet moments, shower running, faucet dripping, the whispers resurface, soft and insistent, carrying secrets from Appalachian depths. Running water feels alive to me now, patient, waiting to be heard by the unwary. The dread lingers, a sorrowful confusion that turns soothing sounds into warnings, reminding me some voices in these mountains aren't meant for the living. They're echoes of what was lost, murmuring forever downstream, hoping someone finally listens. Let's move to last story. We've been planning the trip for weeks, a group of us from the office who needed to blow off steam after a brutal quarter. There was Jenna from accounting, always the organizer with her spreadsheets and checklists. Marcus, the IT guy who could fix anything but his own sleep schedule. Tara, sales rep extraordinaire with a laugh that carried. And me, mid-level project manager, the one who usually played peacemaker when deadlines turned ugly. None of us were hardcore campers, but we wanted something real. No RV parks or crowded sites with RVs humming generators all night. Marcus found the spot on an old forestry map. A meadow deep in the Cherokee National Forest, encircled by thick woodlands, accessible only by a faint service road that hadn't seen maintenance in decades. Open enough to feel safe, he said, but private. We loaded 2 SUVs with tents, coolers, folding chairs, and enough food for a feast, driving out on a Friday afternoon in early May when the dogwoods were blooming and the air still carried winter's edge. The drive wound through valleys where cell service flickered and died, the roads narrowing until pavement gave way to gravel that rattled our teeth. We parked at the road's end, where a rusty gate sagged on its hinges, and hiked the last mile in, packs heavy but spirits high. The meadow opened up like a gift, a wide oval of grass, maybe 50 yards across, ringed by dense hardwoods whose branches interlocked overhead like a natural cathedral. Sunlight poured in from above, warming the ground, while the surrounding trees formed a dark wall that promised privacy. Wildflowers dotted the edges, trillium and violets nodding in the breeze, and a small spring trickled from one side, perfect for filtering water. Laughter filled the air as we set up, Jenna directing tent placement like a general, Marcus struggling with poles until Tara helped, me unloading the cooler and starting a fire ring with stones from the perimeter. We claimed spots in a loose circle, tents facing inward for that communal feel, chairs arranged around the pit. By late afternoon, camp was home. Lanterns hung, food bags hoisted high against bears, a Bluetooth speaker playing low country tunes until Jenna declared acoustic only for the evening. Daylight lingered long in the meadow, the openness letting us watch the sun sink behind the western ridges, painting the sky in streaks of orange and rose. We grilled burgers and corn, passing beers and stories. Office gossip, bad dates, dreams we'd shell for paychecks. The fire crackled high, sparks rising into the deepening blue, and for hours the world felt small and safe, our voices the only sound echoing off the trees. No planes overhead, no distant highway hum, just crickets starting their chorus and the occasional hoot of an owl. The air cooled fast once the sun vanished, dew forming early on the grass, glistening in the firelight like scattered diamonds. We stayed up late, roasting marshmallows until they charred, telling half-remembered ghost stories from childhood. Marcus brought out whiskey, and we passed the bottle, the warmth spreading as the chill settled. Around 1 a.m., exhaustion won. We banked the fire to coals, crawled into tents with sleepy good nights, the meadow quiet under a blanket of stars visible through the treetops. I zipped my flap, lay back on the air mattress, and listened to the others settle. Rustles of sleeping bags, a final laugh from Tara's tent. Sleep came quick, the ground firm but the air fresh, carrying faint scents of smoke and damp earth. I woke pre-dawn, that internal clock kicking in around 5:30, needing to pee. The meadow was still shrouded in gray half-light, the kind where shapes are vague and the world feels paused. Dew soaked everything. My shoes squelched as I stepped out, the grass bent heavy with moisture. I walked a few paces toward the tree lean to relieve myself, careful not to aim near camp, when I noticed them, traces in the dew-soaked grass. Imprints, clear and fresh, pressed into the blades like paths worn by pacing feet. Not random, deliberate loops, encircling our tents in overlapping ovals, as if someone, or several someones, had walked the perimeter all night. My bladder forgotten, I froze, heart ticking faster. The marks were barefoot or close to it, broad heels, toes splayed wide, deeper on the outer edges like weight shifting during long vigils. They ringed us completely, starting inches from Jenna's tent, curving around Marcus's, passing mine twice in tighter spirals. Fresh, too. The dew hadn't reformed inside them, edges sharp. No one had stirred. I'd have heard zippers or footsteps on the soft ground. Yet here was evidence of company, silent and patient. I called out softly, "Guys, you up?" And tents unzipped one by one, sleepy faces emerging into the chill. "What the hell?" Marcus muttered first, spotting the traces near his door. We gathered, breaths fogging, examining the marks and growing unease. They looped endlessly, no beginning or end, just appearing from the grass at the tree lean and vanishing back into it. No entry or exit points visible. Photos were snapped on phones, flashlights revealing details. Some prints overlapped, suggesting multiple passers, all similar in size. Adult but off, arches high like feet long accustomed to earth. Jenna knelt, tracing one with a finger. "Not ours," she said quietly. We'd worn boots yesterday, and these were bare, pressed deep as if bearing weight for hours. Tara laughed nervously. Prank? Someone sneak in? But we knew better. No trails nearby, no other vehicles for miles, and who'd hike this far just to pace silently around strangers' tents? The woods watched as we stood there, the encircling trees dark and still, no birds yet singing. Dew evaporated slowly in the rising light, the traces fading like breath on glass. But the dread remained, heavy as the moisture in the air. We searched the perimeter, pushing into the underbrush where the marks vanished. Ferns undisturbed beyond the grass edge, no broken twigs or scuffs in the leaf litter. Just meadow, then forest wall, as if the imprints materialized from nowhere. Marcus checked for animal tracks, deer, bear, but these were bipedal, rhythmic. Stories we'd laughed off last night resurfaced. Whispers from locals about watchers in the deep woods, feral holdouts, or something older, circling camps but never approaching. Grounded explanations failed. Drunk hikers? Impossible without noise. Sleepwalkers among us? No, we'd have noticed. The meadow felt different now. The openness a trap rather than sanctuary, our circle exposed under invisible eyes. We packed hastily, rolling tents with damp hands, loading packs in silence broken by forced jokes that rang hollow. Photos showed the traces faintly, ghostly depressions in silvergrass, but zoomed in, details blurred as if the dew resisted capture. By full sunrise, most marks were gone, evaporated with the moisture, leaving only ordinary meadow. The hike-out was quiet, our group subdued, the woods closing in tighter than before. Back at the SUVs, we drove without music. Conversation stilted until someone changed the subject to work. That was 3 years ago. We tried one more office outing after, but to a state park with rangers and lights. This meadow remains unspoken. Jenna transferred apartments. Marcus took a remote job. Tara moved cities. I don't group camp anymore, preferring solo or established sites. But those imprints haunt me, a quiet realism that turns dewy mornings into revelations. On cool dawns, stepping onto wet grass, I scan for circles, feeling that encircled vulnerability. What paced us that night? People shunning society, or presences content to observe from the treeline. The woods keep their secrets, leaving no other sign, just faint traces in the dew to remind the unwary they've never truly been alone. The dread lingers, sorrowful and unresolved, a subtle sorrow for the illusion of safety shattered in one silent circuit, hinting that in Appalachia's deep places, company comes uninvited, patient in the dark, circling until the light returns.